Morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning.
This is Chief Deputy John Huneke, and he's going to be speaking today with a very, very interesting topic that I think a lot of people want to know more about. So,
all right, I know. I think we got about 30 to 40 minutes. I have a lot I can discuss. We're going to try to get through some things as fast as we can, but also be informative. If you have questions, just raise your hand, shout it out. Presentation I'm going to do is going to kind of cover homicides, investigations, so that always can have a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to get into cold cases and how we use genetic genealogy to solve cases within Goodhue County. We'll jump back. When Jenny introduced me, she said I was the chief deputy. One of the cases I'm going to talk about today, I worked for more than a couple of years, but I was an investigator for 15 years prior to becoming chief deputy. So I've worked a few homicides. I've worked what I would call the easy to work homicides and the hard to work homicides. So, but yet every homicide is so much different than the next homicide, or just crimes in general. They're not always just cookie cutter. So go with that. I've been with the Sheriff's Office since 1999, started out in our jail, went to our patrol, I've worked as a school resource officer, and then as I said, I was an investigator for 15 years prior to becoming Chief Deputy under Sheriff Kelly here basically 2 years ago. So we'll get started. If you have questions, ask away. There is no silly question. TV has made everyone think our jobs may be as easy at times. We still don't have, if you watch CSI, even 10 and 15 years ago, we still have none of that technology for the most part, where they can bring stuff up and move stuff around. We still don't have that. We're still using laptops, pen and paper, and all that. So I'll start. Homicide investigations. Goodhue County, we are lucky. We don't have many. You can mark, it has not been many homicides. Actually, when we get one, it's kind of a surprise. We're never expecting it, never thinking going into a weekend we're going to get one. When we do, they're a surprise. We deal with them. So picture I'm actually showing up there, that's actually from one of the cases I'm going to talk about in 1999 and 2003. This is from 1999 at the marina there in Red Wing. A baby was found, infant baby was found floating in the river. Some fishermen had discovered the body. That's just kind of, I'm using some of the old photos because even though most of us in this room, 1999 wasn't that long ago, it seems like it was just yesterday. However, what I like to point out, think in 1999, you didn't have cell phones, there's no Facebook, there's not the connectivity. Some of you probably still had the rotary phone still in your house, I know my grandma did. Just technology isn't what it is today. Today, not to scare anybody, but your phone is tracking you everywhere you go. Google, everything's tracked. Facebook, all of that. It's just the society we're in. Back then in 1999, didn't have a lot of that. So I'm going to kind of breeze through some of this because we are in time constraints and I got a lot I do want to get to. Basically, every crime starts out the same way. It's called our dispatch center. Our dispatch center then sends it out to our patrol. We respond to the scene. We just got to figure out what's going on at that scene, what happened. It's the who, what, where, why, whens of everything. Doesn't really change by the case. Evidence collection doesn't also matter for the case. Yeah, homicides, I always say homicides, we take can everybody hear me too? Okay. Homicides, it's no different than any other case. What it is different is the scrutiny. We're not talking about a shoplifting case. So eventually, every homicide is going to end up in front of a jury for the most part, unless a plea deal happens. But when it's a shoplifting crime versus a homicide, the expectation of the public, any jury, is that we know this person's going to go away for this long because our evidence is solid, the case is solid. Not to say shoplifting cases aren't important, but the scrutiny that everything that we do is just the microscope's on it that much more. So when we go to collect evidence, whether it's we're collecting, you gotta get up there, there's shoe prints, there's fingerprints, there's DNA, there's now your digital DNA, digital fingerprint, however you want to put it. All of these things can be used to show that someone was at the scene of a crime or even not at a scene of a crime. Digital evidence has also exonerated many people over time. As I was saying, homicides, they require the greatest effort out of law enforcement. There's no point, at the sheriff's office we could put 20 investigators on, and I can guarantee you with the homicides I've worked over time, even if we had 20 investigators, we might not have enough to really be able to do everything. That's why we rely on our partners. We have the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension that can come down to help us. But one other great thing we have, we are a sheriff's office. We have support of all the other sheriff's offices around. When I did my time as a narcotics investigator, that's what I primarily did for 15 years, I knew I had 12 to 13 people we could call in addition to come and help us. So I'd actually helped other counties work homicides and got experience doing that by assisting them when they had homicides. When we do get that call, a lot of what we got to figure out is we get missing persons calls. Is it going to be a homicide or is this person missing? Sometimes it is just that. They just chose not to be found. Anybody heard about the kayaker over in Wisconsin who then ended up over in Europe? That's one possibility. Another possibility is something nefarious did happen and we do have a homicide. The big thing, if anyone heard, it was in the news a lot here last year down in Winona with that missing girl. A lot of people from our sheriff's office actually went down and helped Winona County, and that's when I say none of the counties can do it their own. They have to rely on their partners. Winona County got a ton of help, not only from the public, a ton of volunteers, other sheriff's offices, police departments all came down to help them to try to find, I believe it was Maddie, who was missing. Eventually did locate her, but when you start talking about searching ravines and woods and all of that, I know I helped on it, and there were some very steep ravines when you get down into the Winona County, Fillmore County type areas. When we are at scenes too, there are times we show up, I kind of use this for an example the other day. You show up, there's a big silo and someone's laying on the ground. We have to figure out what happened. Are we always gonna know right away? Nope. We don't know that someone didn't push them from the top. We don't know that they could have just fell, hit the ground, died from that. They could have had a heart attack or a brain aneurysm up there. It's a lot of that stuff. So it's not always us figuring out the cause of death either. We do rely on medical examiners that come out. They take a look at stuff too. Their job's not easy either. There's times when you're looking at just, it's like someone fell asleep. It's hard to know always what caused the death. But that's where we rely on them. There's sometimes, cause of death can just be unknown. There's sometimes it's easy. If someone has a bullet hole or blunt force trauma, not hard to figure out what caused that death for the most part. You get into some of the drug facilitated deaths that we see. That's where blood tests are going to come in. Was there a high amount of fentanyl or methamphetamine? Things like that. I've worked a homicide many years ago, but it was determined, we knew who two mutual combatants. It was ruled a homicide because a homicide is just saying someone else inflicted injuries, but there's also defenses to homicide, like self-defense. So we've had those cases as well. You do see it on TV, so I'm not going to say this happens in Goodhue County, but we do have to, every time we come to a scene, you don't immediately assume it's a homicide, you don't assume it's an accident, you let what's in front of you guide you. You just have to have a very open mind. Just because someone's laying on the ground and there's a gun next to them, it could be suicide, it could be something else, it could be a homicide. You just have to let the facts kind of take you where it does. MEs, and this is a slide more of what the MEs decide. Was it a natural, was it an accident, homicide, suicide, all of that. So they do their work too. So I'm going to get into genetic genealogy. So the picture I showed up there was from 1999. So when I said they didn't have a lot back then, and also when you start, and I'll get into some of this, the 99 and 2003. All you have is a baby that was in the river. That's all you know. You don't know who the family is. You know none of that. They didn't have genetic genealogy back then. In this case, it'll be kind of interesting because when I even talk about it, the technology even changed that we used within that year that allowed us to get a quicker resolution on the case. But with genetic genealogy, in a basic way, I think someone might try to, someone's at the door, sorry. Genetic genealogy, what it does is it takes, say everyone in this room is unrelated, you all took or maybe a couple of you are related, you go and take a DNA swab, it puts it into a database, and what it does is it can give a relationship. So it's called centimorgans. So actually up here, and I might be blocking it a little bit, it just gives a percentage. If you're 49 centimorgans, that would be an indication of a relation. You might be like fifth cousins. So the higher the centimorgans, the more likely it's a closer relation. So that's basically when if I say centimorgans, that's all it is. It's just how closely are you related. So I show this because this looks like it's busy. This is when you're a genetic genealogist. This isn't me, this is the company we paid, and I'll talk about that here. These are all data points you get. What genetic genealogist does and genealogy people do is what you have to do is figure out, okay, what does this all mean? What is this, how is this data point, and this data point related? How does that get you where you want to be? What you're really doing is you're taking representative people, so the dots are people. You're now trying to say, if this person, I'll just use that person, is related, and I'll start talking about our 1999 baby. If they have their fifth cousins to that baby, so there's maybe 49 centimorgans, 23 centimorgans, how you actually start doing genetic genealogy is you put them into groups. So this might be the Smith clan, this might be an Anderson clan, and then you start to figure out how do they sit, how do they match up. Because in the end, what you're trying to do with genetic genealogy is find out for us, we want to know who the 1999 baby was, but how we would really figure everything out is who's the mother or father for that. And when I talk about this, these were the three babies. Corey, Abby, and Jamie were the three babies that were in the river. The reason I show this is, these were the composites they did. But they did a great job in 1999 and 2003. This case didn't get solved till just in 2022. What they did is try to keep this in the news as much as they could. Cases how would I put this? They call them cold cases. Cold cases are cases you never work on, you never look at. This wasn't one of those type of cases. They were trying to keep it in the news, trying to get information out. Because when you have not much for leads, you have to do everything possible you can. This is picture of the gravestone in Red Wing. There's actually a lady that very much, I would say, they were part of the gravestone, putting all the money towards it, kept it in the news. Miss Matson did a great job with that. And I'm just going to play this video. This was from a Care 11 special they did on it. But the reason I kind of show this too is this is where genetic genealogy comes in when you really think about it. I talked about all the lack of technology. You'll even see from some of this, it was a long time ago, they didn't have that much they could work with outside of the old.
Discovery in the Mississippi River, November 4, 1999.
Can you
Two
hear it?
young fishermen, high school seniors, and their uncle find the body of a newborn wrapped in a towel.
I don't believe there probably is a more difficult homicide case.
A difficult case and shocking for the community of Red Wing, Minnesota at the time. And it grew to be known as the mystery of the babies in the water when it happened again, a second time and a third time in the 6 years that followed.
Most homicides, we know who the victim is. We have an identity, we have fingerprints that we can run. In this case, we do not have any of that.
Macabre discovery in the Mississippi
This is where you're gonna
River,
have to
November
bear
4,
with me for technology.
1999.
Got one more just quick video to play.
Full-term newborn girl that Goodhue County authorities say was born alive and dumped in the river as many as 2 weeks ago.
Police have no idea who the mother is or who left the baby in the Mississippi River, but they do know the baby was a newborn. Her umbilical cord still attached.
You know, this is a sad situation both ways. You've got a child that never is allowed to live, and you've got a mother out there now is probably dealing with some personal, just huge tragedy in her emotions in her life.
I wonder if it's somebody from town or if it's from the Twin Cities down. It's just too bad when someone feels they have to abandon a child.
Oh, I'm just devastated. I just can't imagine how anybody would just, drop off a baby.
I was pretty much speechless.
And tonight it's a tragedy that Jason and Trevor say they'll never forget.
I guess it's kind of the biggest waste of life I've ever seen. Something that you should cherish and love, just kind of thrown away. And
Full-term newborn girl that Goodhue County authorities say was born alive and dumped.
So that's just kind of giving you some of the news articles, stuff that was done back in the day, they were stumped. Thousands of leads, everybody was calling in. I was a young, like I said, I started with the Sheriff's Office in 1999. When I was a school resource officer in like 2002, 2003, I would go and help the investigators that worked on that. We would go door to door. There's also a 2007 baby. We were knocking on trailer parks. We were knocking on residential homes. Just, did you see anything? Trying to get leads. When I was a school resource officer in the summer, a lead would come in on something, they'd assign it to you, you'd go out and you'd work it, you'd try to get DNA, just trying to eliminate people or figure out who it was. I know for those investigators that worked at some of them, it was pretty much their career where these cases just hung out there. Like I said, they did everything they could. They were creative. This playing card here, it was through the Minnesota BCA. They actually put playing cards in prisons, just trying to get, is there a lead out there? Did somebody talk to somebody that would know something about it? So they pretty much tried everything they could to try to get any lead. That was always their hope. They kind of all knew at the end. Prior to genetic genealogy, the only way it was going to get resolved is the mother came in and just finally confessed, or somebody finally they just weighed on them so much that they knew something about what had happened. So in 2020, late 2020, one of our investigators brought forward the idea of let's use genetic genealogy, and it had started to be in the news. They were, I remember watching a 60 Minutes show where they were talking about North Carolina, where they took some DNA and they built out a profile of a suspect. So this was all out there. So one of our investigators came forward, talked to Sheriff Kelly about getting a justice drive going to raise the funds. I won't get into all the details, but basically the funds had to be raised through this justice drive so we could get money to a company to just take the DNA profiles we had and see what they could get. If anybody remembers the Justice Drive, I think it was about 2 or 3 days and we had our $10,000. There was overwhelming support from the public to get that done. And then once we got that money in, the DNA samples, the profile I'll call it, went to this company called Parabon. If you look them up, you're hearing a lot of the cases that are solved, whether I think it was, the Golden Gate Killer, Parabons are these type of companies, even the quadruple homicide out in Idaho, when they caught the guy so quick, genetic genealogy was used on that. So it's used for cases that are 25 years old, it's used for cases that are maybe 3 days old. So I'm going to kind of go through the timeline of where we got to actually solve this case. So in the Justice Drive starts in 2020, end of 2020, there's some names that start to pop up. And when I say pop up, in the end, they ended up being like fifth cousins, 3 times removed type stuff. If you've ever done any type of genealogy, that ain't that close. So you got this person way over here, maybe you got that person way over there. And I have changed some of the names in this. The only name I will actually use is Jennifer Matter. That is the only real name that you'll hear out of me. Everything else is fictitious. At some point when I do more of these presentations, I'm going to have more detail. Probably the names of my kids' cats. So if you hear a name, don't go try tracking anybody down. You won't find them because I made up their names. But anyway, in 2020, sorry, we have an investigator who's actually about to retire coming into 2021. We kind of get our first, hey, this might be a possibility. And when we were dealing with the genealogy people, they can never say anything for sure, because when you're dealing with genealogy and family trees, you only know what information is out there that's available. If anybody's ever tried to do a family tree, you can get one error on who a grandfather was, an uncle was, can take you totally down a wrong path when you're doing stuff. So what we eventually got, here's 2 people you should go look at. They were a brother and sister. And here I call them Kurt and Roz. So what we knew too, through some previous testing that had been done 10 years before this, when we went to talk to them, is there was another test done where we knew our 99 and 2003 baby were siblings. So they were half siblings is what we basically, kind of what was the theory. So what made sense was, when we went to talk to Kurt and Roz, it didn't make sense that Kurt was the father of 2 with 2 different women. It was possible. What made more sense is this Roz could could easily be the mother of both. We went and talked to Kurt and Roz. They were very cooperative. Also, it was the first time where it's like, it kind of hits home that it's not like we're accusing somebody of shoplifting. We're not, something petty. We're accusing you of doing something that most people consider pretty bad thing. Babies in a river that were born alive. They cooperated with us, gave us DNA samples, and this is where I say everything takes time. Everything's a hurry up and wait for us. So we got no indications that they knew anything about this. They were very cooperative, and we got their DNA samples. This is where things take time. In that meantime, Investigator Behringer, he was the one who kind of started the genetic genealogy. So he's retiring in the first part of 2021. I had started working on the case with him just to get up on the details. And when you're talking a case that has stretched 20 years, there's just a lot of details to know. If I would stack the case files, they were about that high. Just when you talk about lead sheets and all of that. So January 2021, we go and talk to him. April 2021, we start to get some BCA results back, and it shows us, so we had 99 in 2003. We find out there's no relation to 2003. Well, right away I know Roz is not going to be the mother, because if she's not 2003, she can't be 99, since they were half siblings. So what we find out through all of this is that Kurt is the father of our 1999 baby. So a lot of times with genetic genealogy, it seems simple. You're going to contact a company, they're going to say, well, here's who it is, and now we should be able to go to talk to Kurt, and Kurt's going to tell us, yeah, here's who I was in an intimate relationship with, and there we go. We got our 1999 and 2003 mother. Easy peasy, we should be good. We did talk to Kurt. He tells us here's 3 women. And now, I would say this. Can anybody remember what you're doing back in 1999? I usually say without some type of life event, a new job, whatever it might be, maybe a kid got married, whatever, or a death in the family. Most of us don't have the greatest memory. We want to think we do, but we actually don't. He did the best he could. So we actually said, think of anybody, we knew the date the baby was found, so let's just backtrack there. We also know, babies just aren't carried by a female for, a month, so we should have somewhat of a time period here. He gave us 3 names. We took those 3 names, and that's when I started diving into it, and even Parabon. There's a great lady, she lives out in California, Christine's her name. Kind of became phone friends, just because we were always working on this. So we built out, could any of these three females fit? And you want to look at locations. There's one of the females I was looking at, I'm like, she might have been deployed, so you can't really put a baby in a river if you're overseas. So it was all those type of things we looked at. June 30th, that was the actual date that we found out Kurt was truly the father. So that's all from a January DNA, you're talking 5 months, so there's this big lag time. What started occurring to me is, as this got more difficult to figure out, I'm looking at these 3 females, nothing's starting to fit for me. It's like, this doesn't make sense. From when he says he quit dating this girl, he actually knew because he moved. Well, I started looking at it, like, well, this person seems probable, but that means you would have had to carry a baby for 18 months. Highly improbable. And then this isn't matching up, because by the time you say you're dating this person, that person would have had to carry a baby for 2 months. You can't have a 7-pound baby after 2 months. So as much as genetic genealogy is saying got us there, now we're relying on the human side of it, their memories and all of that. It just didn't add up. So what I started realizing really quickly is we have to be sure we're down the right road we're on. It'd be no different if we misidentified someone in a genealogy tree, because if you go on Ancestry.com or 23andMe, all these places, they'll say, yeah, this probably is your relative. They're taking an educated guess. It doesn't mean it is. One, you have to go research that person and make sure that's the person. If you go down that wrong road, now you're going down a lot of wrong roads, and you're losing time. The one thing I will always say about any cold case is the case is there forever. The investigators, the people that work that case, they're the ones that retire and go away. And now the next person has to come in and investigate and get up to speed on it. So, while it's a cold case, it's not urgent to get things done, there's no time to just take a break on it. You have to keep working on it, because we get sick, we get promotions, we take new jobs, whatever it may be. So I knew nothing was fitting for throughout the summer and fall of 2021. Not to say that we weren't going to go eliminate people as possible suspects. In the end, how I looked at genetic genealogy investigations, it's eliminating people out. So if I think I've got these people, they have relatives too that could possibly be, let's eliminate them out however we can. So we had started that process. Nothing was fit. I wasn't feeling good about any of the people if we were going to go talk to them. I actually delayed going and talking to anyone, and we actually went and tried on one. You can go get abandoned DNA, which means if anybody leaves your coffee cup here, someone wants to think they can go grab your coffee cup, take it into the lab, they can take your DNA because it's abandoned. We can legally go take it because it's like you've discarded it. So we actually looked at, hey, can we go get abandoned DNA? If any remember, not that I'm trying to give anyone like PSTD, saying that all wrong, COVID threw a wrench in everything. What weren't people doing? They weren't going out. Everybody did everything different. People's patterns were not the same. People weren't going to the grocery store once a week. They were stocking up when they did everything. So that even it just changed up how we had to do things. People quit smoking like they used to. It used to be easy. You probably could follow someone that were throwing cigarette butts out. Also, that sounds a lot easier when you see that in a TV show. You got to be pretty close to someone and see them throw out a cigarette butt. And then you got to slam on the brakes pretty quick or you're never going to find that cigarette butt back. So any TV show, yeah, sounds great. It ain't that easy. For doing 15 years of narcotics work, I'll tell you this. Surveillance is pretty boring. Go sit on any house for more than an hour and you're going to get really bored. But yeah, it sounds easy, but it's not. It's very time consuming. But as we keep going, we did try some abandoned DNA from a door handle of a car, thinking, okay, on the TV, that's easy. They go and they swab it and they get it back. Nope, we couldn't get a good sample off even a door handle because you still need enough DNA matter there. But yeah, January 2022, I really was at where I'm like, I have built up all these family trees. I got to know these people I felt. I knew there's only one female left where I'm like, it could be possible because I knew going back to her great grandfather was unknown. I knew enough of that they knew who the grandmother was. We're talking back in the 20s, there was a rail worker that was suspected to be the father, and nobody knew who he was. So I'm like, maybe, but now it's an unknown grandfather, or possible grandfather, but maybe there's something in here we're missing. And same thing with people in Parabon who do that for a living, they were just as much like, could be, but it's highly unlikely. I'm having the genealogy people tell me, yeah, highly unlikely. Then what throws a wrench in it, I realized these three females, this just doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Maybe Kurt's memory is bad. So I try calling Kurt. I get a call from a lawyer. Now you're going, okay, I know the 99 biological father, and now he's got a lawyer. What's going on here? When I talked before about homicides, how you just can't jump to conclusions, I didn't jump to a conclusion. I didn't think this means Kurt was in on it, anything else. I also was going, it's COVID. Everyone is more hypersensitive than ever. If I was in his shoes, would I be feeling like maybe the cops, because now we're contacting again, this is a cop trick, they're trying to get me for something, whatever. So I didn't worry about it much, but what I was trying to do is get, hey, these three don't make sense. Is there anybody else? I sent a lot of emails. I even started sending emails because I just wanted to do elimination. Here's three names. Were you ever in a relationship with them? And if he would have said no, I could have crossed them off. What I later learned, after you send 5 emails, leave many voicemails, you don't hear back, people have the right to not talk to the cops. We kind of felt that's what was happening. Later, come to find out, whatever reason, the voicemails didn't go through, and all the emails were going to junk mail. So it's the little things where you think, oh, this should be easy. It was anything but. But then we got a new genetic hit. The genetic hit didn't, and I'll show you a chart here, was anything like, hey, here's the first cousin of this person. Here it's going to be super easy. Hey, we got a hit. It's from a group of people up in Stearns County. That's all we got for you. So there's some Johnsons up in Stearns County. There you go. Figure that out. So we get back to, we start looking. Back up a slide, sorry. But in that slide, and I'm kind of giving you a sneak previews of what I'm going to talk about, but it's the first time Jennifer Matter, who is eventually the person that we identify and arrest, it's the first time her name's ever shown up in any part of this investigation. I talked about the files that were that high. I went through it. Later, I went through after this was all done, we had her in jail. I went through, did her name ever show up? Did not. So when I go back to the investigators in 99 and 2003, you're looking for somebody that's names never come up amongst the hundreds and thousands of possible names. So yes, her name did come up. Finally, in this genetic genealogy, when we started doing the trees, still was nothing saying that's her. She was one of, here's 30 people it could possibly be, based off the family tree, because we're talking about going back to family trees in the 1910s, and then imagine all the descendants. What I did in seeing her name, I knew from Kurt, who his hairdresser was at the time, through talking to Kurt. I found a police report, though, that said Kurt's hairdresser and Jennifer Matter were in the same car for an incident. So it was kind of the first time I'm like, at least, it's hard to have children with someone if you never know them or are around them. That at least told me there could be some type of connection. But at that point, it wasn't like, this is our person, we're solely focusing on them. So one thing I knew, once again, going back to if we could find, to narrow it down, you start building out family trees. If you can find people that would maybe even volunteer to give you DNA, you could start to narrow stuff down. So that was a lot of the work I started doing. I had messages off to people in England, I think somebody in Germany, because if we could use their profiles. So one thing I didn't say is, when Parabon uses this, they don't, like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, all these, they don't get to check all of that. It's the people that allow their DNA to be used for law enforcement purposes. You have to check that box. So even if everybody in here did a DNA genealogy stuff, only those that checked that you could use it, that'd be the only ones they're checking on. So that's where sometimes I've heard people go, well, why didn't you get more hits? Well, it's because not everybody wants their DNA bouncing around there to be checked in by a criminal database, so which we totally understand. With trying to build this up and find people, COVID was more waning at this point, but people became a lot more connected. When every time I would look at, hey, there's maybe a relative of this person, first thing I did was check Facebook and see if they were friends. Because over COVID, people got, maybe I'm the only one that saw this, people got a little bit more willing to post things on Facebook and maybe get a little more upset about stuff. And if all of a sudden law enforcement came to their door and said, hey, we'd like to get this random sample from you, we can't tell you why, I felt there was a pretty good possibility this was going to end up on Facebook, or why were the cops at my house? And if you were the person that did what Jennifer did, that might make you go, hey, the cops are onto me. And we were all about the element of surprise when we did all of this. So yeah, we talked to people from Germany, England, Nebraska, California. We're all law enforcement agencies we'd reach out to, just trying to set the stage, because it wasn't like they go over and they did their own. We had to send them a special kit. So we had to do some pre-planning if we got to that. So when I say we built out trees, this is actually one of the trees. This is one of 7, I think, we built out. So at some point, here's my 1999 and 2003 babies down here. When so we built it all the way back, when Stearns County, when I talked about that, that goes back to of these babies, their great, 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 great grandparents. That's how far back some of this went. When I said we tried to go find DNA, we didn't have DNA from one side of Jennifer's family. We knew relatives back to 1787, so there's actually, I didn't make this phone call because I don't think I could have called from the county, calling over to Czechoslovakia, trying to find relatives that came down through this tree. The one thing I did know, because we were kind of in a standstill, and with my background, when I was an investigator doing narcotics, we get stuff done. It's a little hard just to sit and wait at times, so you're always trying to think, what's the next thing we can do? We were still kind of stuck. We weren't narrowed down. We had 15, 20 females. If we went and interviewed every one of them, element of surprise is kind of gone at that point. We're not going to do that. So I started researching and researching, started going, okay, is there anybody local? I knew enough of the names that, okay, I know this family name's out there a little bit. I might be able to find people. Eventually we did. I actually misplaced my star, but we were able to go back and find a relative that would have been, I always got to check this, within the great-grandfather's range. And the higher up we could get, the closer The lower you get down here, like if it's a first cousin, the hit's gonna be much less, maybe it might be a 40 centimorgan hit. The higher up I got, then I knew it hit an 80 or 90. So we knew when we went and talked to this person who was older, and I just said, hey, I can't tell you why, but we'd like to get this. And I said, your name will never be known, and I'll never say his name, but volunteered. But it's a tough thing. Law enforcement shows up at your house and says, we'd like to take a DNA sample for a case I can't tell you about. The only thing I ever told him is none of your descendants, and I didn't lie to him, none of your descendants are involved in this. And that's all he really needed to know, and he was good with it. Then it also helps, Sheriff Kelly finds this out too. I'm from the area, so it kind of helps when people know who you are a little bit, or at least have heard of your names, that, yeah, we're telling you the truth. I'm not here trying to get your nephew or your grandkids. So when we got that result back, it was kind of it narrowed me down when we got that result back, which took a bit again too. Nothing ever happens quickly for us on anything. But when we got it back, it still didn't say this is your person for sure. It said you're much more likely, you're down to 3 people. And when I talked about we'd go through and when we'd go through, you'd find out who's likely. I knew then when I was to my 3, okay, this person's the most likely. This is who I should concentrate on. I'm not gonna not look at the other people, but I knew for the most part that was likely my person. Neonaticide, and this is where also, so I've worked homicides before, I've worked sex assaults, I've worked all these cases. I had not worked a neonaticide, and the reason it's important on that, while rare, it's not uncommon. There's also a different, I would call it profile. If you think about it, you carried a baby for 9 months, and at the end, I mean, there were abortions then, there was, all of that. To go dump them in the river, it's just different. It's whatever they're going through at the time. So I knew enough that I know I didn't know enough. So we started reaching out to people. I talked to investigators that investigated these crimes before. We wanted to find out what works, what doesn't work. I was very lucky to talk to a person in Cook County who investigated 2 babies and got some ideas from her that helped. And eventually we talked to the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, and they drew up actually a profile. I sent them, here's what I know about my 3 females, and they said the same thing as soon as they saw the profiles, that's your person. Just with how I built up life history, all of that type of stuff. We worked on an investigative strategy for the interview, because where this is different, and you can really mess these up if you just show up at the door and go, hey, did you do this? They're not gonna come out right away and say it. You have to have a strategy when you do it. Part of the strategy was that I had to no longer be the lead on the case when it came to interviewing. The recommendation was to get a female who was a mother, who could show a lot more empathy. I also will say, I can't describe to you what labor pains are. Only a female who's went through labor can do that. So that wasn't even part of that. It was, part of the strategy for who we got, which we're lucky. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, we're running out of time. We were lucky enough to get BCA Special Agent Brittany Carstensen from the BCA. We had some BCA contacts, we called up, we said, this is who we need. We don't need someone who's gonna come in there and be very direct. We need someone with a lot of empathy and all that, and they identified Brittany. BCA was great enough to have her come down. Brittany was an experienced investigator with the BCA, had children, all of that, so she fitted perfectly. She came down and got up to speed on a case, which I was fortunate enough to have 2 years. She got about 2 months, and it was, here's our suspect, let's get going, let's go find him. So one thing that I probably breezed over, because I was always thinking ahead, going in February, and now we're gonna start talking about April, because DNA takes forever. In February, I actually went, I said, okay, does Jennifer have any family in the area? So I went and got abandoned DNA, I did get some. Never knew if it was gonna pan out. We eventually got results back on one of her family members. So, which actually ended up being, showing that that family member was a half sibling to the 1999 and 2003 babies. But yet, when we go out in April, I don't know that yet. We're always waiting for test results and test results. But in April, we say, it's time to go. We're down to 3, there's nobody else, it's gotta be Jennifer. Like I said, You can sit there and think, well, we could wait 2 months, we could wait 4 months. After a while, you just have to decide to go. And this is how small of a world it is. When I figured out who Jennifer was, I didn't have to drive far from my house, 8 minutes away. So I knew everybody around her. It was just weird. I didn't necessarily know her, but then you start realizing I know everybody around you. So, and then we often have this in law enforcement. You have to be so careful with what you ever say. And then there was also a Care 11 episode coming out. So of course, when people know, here you're working on it, they want to ask questions, and you're like, you literally could be talking to someone who might see this person in an hour. So it gets where it weighs on you a little bit there. So on April 25th, and this is where it took us 2 years to get here, April 25th, we go to her house. We go there, me and Special Agent Carsonson go there, just met her in her garage. And I would say, I was not dressed like this. I was dressed in a hoodie. It looked like maybe I'd been out on an ATV ride, just stopping by. That was part of our strategy as well. We go there, says she doesn't know anything about it, won't give us a DNA sample. Okay, that's where we're at. Not giving us a DNA sample, not pretending to know, kind of aloof towards us. Like, okay, doesn't all make sense, but whatever. I still think she's our suspect. We leave. 3 days later, I finally get the call back from Kurt's lawyer. And he eliminates a whole bunch of other females, like I talked about, and then says, he still disagrees to this day. He does not think he ever had relations with her in 1999. We have results that say it's 4.9 quintillion times more likely than not, which, look up quintillion at some point, that he was the father. But that's it. It's just your memories. They are what they are. So that happens on April 25th. We talk to her. April 28th, we get the confirmation from the biological father, yes, I did have relations with her, not with any of the other females that had been mentioned. So now we know we're really close. On April 30th, that's when I actually got the result back. Her son, her living biological son, is actually half brother to the 1999 baby. We didn't get results back for 2003 because it didn't matter at that point. We actually knew if it was 99, it was also 2003. So now it went from January thinking, never gonna solve this. This is gonna sit around forever. All of a sudden, April 25th happens where we're still like, we don't have any DNA, and all the DNA starts rolling in. And at times, you would think we would have got better. Yeah, we're gonna have results for you at this time. We didn't. We were kind of just waiting. We're also pushing on the crime labs a little bit. But once we knew on April 25th, and this is where it just really flows quickly, once we knew on April 28th with the half, with the relation, so the work in February actually is paying off now. We were able to go get a warrant to get her DNA. I still remember actually giving, it was Judge Bailey who signed the warrant. Me and Judge Bailey had a long history where I was always bringing up drug search warrants. But when I actually gave him the warrant, I'm like, this is longer, and you're gonna, because we're very cordial, and he's like, oh, I'll just read this quick. I'm like, no, you're gonna have, he was in the back room reading the warrant, I think, for a good hour. Because he also realized when it came out just the magnitude of what we were dealing with. But we get a DNA warrant for her, now we go find her again. We traffic stop her. She also lives at a very rural residence. It's not easy to watch her. There's no cell phone signals. It's just that kind of area. So it's hard to sit on people. But we eventually get her in another interview room up in Rosemont, or Farmington, sorry. In there, we say, we got a warrant for your DNA. The only question she had about anything is, and we actually said, try to interview her again. Do you know anything about the 1999 baby? No, doesn't know anything. We then say, well, we know your son is a half relation to this kid. Only question she had was, how did you get my son's DNA? No denial, but still not giving us what we needed. But we did get her DNA at that point with a warrant. Results come back. Now I say where I've been talking 6 months for results. The BCA just rolled out something called rapid DNA. We had our results back basically that next day. So instead of having to wait 6 months, the new technologies come around. Well, not as accurate where it can get you the quintillions like we later got. It said she's 600 million times more likely to be the mother than not. So now we go from April 28th, hearing about a half sibling, to now we're at May 2nd, knowing she's the mother. One thing that you're not going to see in here, we still needed a confession to make sure we had this. Autopsies are what they are. They can be argued a lot of ways by defense attorneys. When we left that day on May 5th to go interview her, the only way I knew that she would go to jail at some point is if we got an actual confession that that baby was born alive, and left on the side of the river. That's that edge of the water. That's the only way we're gonna get that conviction. So when myself and Agent Carstensen were driving out, we kind of knew, we knew the gravity of the situation, that without a confession, I might be here talking to you today, we know who the mother is, and she's walking the streets. So we absolutely knew we needed that confession. It paid off with listening to the FBI, with their investigative strategy. Brittany did a great job. I sat on my hands. That was actually my job, was just to, if Brittany needed some fact known to her that maybe she forgot, but I pretty much sat on my hands because let's let what they said this investigative strategy is play out and work here. After a very long interview, and we never once mentioned the 2003 baby. That was part of the strategy. We only ever talked about 1999. She had told us the 1999 baby was stillborn and left in the river. I can tell you the autopsy never said which way or the other, so that's why we never got her 1999 charge. 2003 was different. The autopsy report had indicated the baby was born alive, probably even in a warm place, those type of things. But then we sprung the 2003 on her, and then that's when we finally got an admittance on that, yes, the baby was born alive. I left it at the side of the river in below freezing temperatures and all of that. And all of this occurred, once again, in her garage, and her family was actually around for it. So it's the most non-typical thing. If you would see it on TV where they're sweating somebody in an interview room, this was very casual. It was done like we're all sitting around this table when we got that. We didn't arrest her right away. That was part of our strategy too. We actually gave her the weekend to be at home. A lot of times when people in these cases, even though they could be looking at 30 years in jail, they're only thinking about the next couple days. So it's part of even an investigative strategy. We were true to our word. We did not arrest her that day. She was gonna have time to be with her family who was around there to support her. And the one thing I'll say about her family, great people. They're very supportive of us the entire time. May 9th, we arrest Jennifer Matter, and in April, and how quickly everything did go from May 9th of 2022. By April of 2023, she was sentenced to 27 years in prison for that. I often get times, and I just preempt this, whether 27 years was appropriate or not, I'm not the judge nor the jury. We're the finders of facts. We bring stuff forward for them to make those decisions. I went over a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks for having me.
All right.